Okay. So, Jai Janendra, Sadharmi Bandhuo. So now we are going to continue the book reading Cosmology Old and New, authored by Professor G.R. Jain. In our part 3, we left the book when we were reading about the Dharma Dravya. In the previous parts 1, 2, and 3, we have read about the space, the Jain philosophy about space. Now we have and few things we have started in part 3 about Dharma Dravya. So here we will continue and we will start from this sutra. The attributes of Dharmastikaya are given in Svetambara Sutras as follows. Dhammatikaelam jivalam agam nagaman bhasum me samana yoga vai yoga kaya yoga jeyavanne tapakara chala bhava savyete dhammatikaye pavatant gailakhanenam dhammatikaye dhamma dhamme yadoeve logamitta viha viyahiya loga logeya agase samaye samay khetiye. The Jaina point of view with regard to the media of motion and rest, dharma and dharma, is well summarized by Professor A. Chakravarti Nayanar, MALT Presidency College, Madras, in his English commentary on Panchastikaya. We quote the following from the same work. Motion and rest contemplated in this connection are distinctly physio-mathematical. They should not, therefore, be interpreted even metaphorically to mean anything more than that connotation. We have to remember the following points. Dharma and adharma are amurta dravyas. They have no sense qualities of color, etc. They are ajiva. So the first thing is that they are amurta. Amurta means they are not perceivable in the sense of matter. They are ajivas, they are non-living things. They have a spatial relation, thou, in themselves. Eka pradeshi. They are niskriya, that is non-active. They are bahiranga hetu or udasina hetu and not mukhya hetu. So we will see what bahiranga hetu or udasina hetu in the following text. They are non-discrete and continuous. So as we have already seen in chapter in part 3 that the author mentioned that the dharma is continuous, but for the convenience point of view, for the convenience, we used to discretize it. These are some of the important common qualities emphasized by the Jain thinkers. The Jain philosopher recognized in the world matter, life, and space. But are they enough? No. There would be no world. The atoms and jiva may be scattered throughout the infinite space. So what author is trying to say here, until now that we have recognized, the Jaina philosophers have recognized the world that consists matter, that constitutes matter, that has matter, life and space, right? Udgala, Jiva, and Akash. But are they enough? We can describe the whole world that we see around us using only these three quantity or entities. So no, there would be no world. The atoms and jivas may scatter throughout the infinite space. Who is going to limit them? Therefore, there must be something else besides these three. That something must be able to maintain a coherent system of jivas and atoms, must have the function of preventing the atoms from flying about, must limit the boundary of the world of things and persons. So it is not that nature has some kind of obligation because of it. This is an interpretation because we are watching the nature and we are interpreting that these things only cannot exist. We need something other that for the existence of these three entities that we have studied or read in the previous parts. And these three entities were matter, life, and space. So that is not, it is, the idea here is not that sometimes people say no, because we think in that way, that's why nature behave in that way. No, that's not the idea. The point is because people are observing things in the nature, and because of that observation, there must be something that should control these three entities that have been explained so far in this book. Okay. For the author distinctly says that without adharma, there would be only chaos. There would be no world. Therefore, the Jain thinkers pointed the existence of a fourth entity which binds together things and persons. So the hypothesis of adharma. This is something like Newton's gravitation, but adharma is slightly different. Its main function is to arrest things, but then there is one difficulty. If there were adharma alone, how could there be motion at all things? So the idea, because dharma doesn't help. Dharma does not force jiva and matter to move. It helps to move, but does not force. So if there is a dharma which is arresting or which is opposing that motion, then how things will move? There would be an eternal paralysis of reality. Yes, that's true. To remove this difficulty, dharma had to be posited. The function of dharma is to guarantee motion within the limits imposed by dharma. Yes. This is the reason for the second hypothesis, because until which distance in space things are going to move, or what will be the limit of movement? If there is no limit, then how the things will move apart? Yeah, that's what we are seeing because of the acceleration of universe, the expanding universe. It is expanding. We don't know until what or how long it's going to be expanded. But the trouble is not yet over. If the two exist within a spatial limit, one guaranteeing motion and the other rest, then the things in motion must be in motion forever, and things at rest must be there forever. But our experience is not so of that kind. Yes, that's true. One and the same body has motion or rest. It may move or it may come to stay. Therefore, dharma and dharma must be deprived of their causality. They can only be bahiranga hetu or udasin hetu. That is, they must be indifferent and neutral in themselves, and yet must be indispensable to the composition of the world. So it is here udasin hetu means that they are indifferent and neutral from each other. Yes. This seems to be the logical development of the system. The most approximate modern conception answering to the description will be ether of the physicist, but the Jaina system required two such entities functionally different, one acting like Newton's gravitation, dharma, and the other guaranteeing motion within the limits. It would not be quite accurate to think of centripetal or centrifugal forces because dharma and adharma are niskriya. Does it mean the duality of electromagnetic influence of ether? The Duality of electromagnetic influence of ether. The constitution of an atom is supposed to be a system of electrons, positive and negative. Had the Jain thinkers any such idea about the whole world? We can only contemplate, but of this much we are certain that dharma and adharma are parts of the physical system. They are two different entities without which the system of reality would be impossible and incomplete. Let us see what has a physicist to say about his ether. In a popular scientific work, An Outline for Boys and Girls and Their Parents, we find the following. The first problem was, of course, that if light waves were real waves, they must be waves in something. They were plainly not waves in matter. It was necessary, therefore, to invent something else which was not matter for them to be waves in. This something they called the ether and imagined it was an utterly thin and utterly elastic fluid that flowed undisturbed between the particles of the material universe and filled all empty space of every kind. So here, well, when we say waves, so it's the imagination of human mind that when we disturb the water, the still water, and when we say there are spherical waves are traveling outwards, so those waves are basically the disturbance in the water. So the water is the material. In the same way that scientists were troubled that not now, this is a old story, how the electromagnetic waves are traveling in what medium. It's not because of that kind of imagination. So what kind of waves they are? The author is talking about the light. The light is electromagnetic that we know now, of course. Okay. This is something they call ether, and imagine it is an utterly thin and utterly elastic fluid that flowed undisturbed between the particles of the material universe and filled all empty space of every kind. What was this ether like? Difficulties and contradictions appeared at once. For it was proved to be thinner than thinnest gas, more rigid than steel, absolutely the same everywhere, absolutely weightless, and in the neighborhood of any electron, immensely heavier than lead. Again, we have from F.M. Danton's Relativity and Common Sense. The Newtonian ether is rigid, yet allows all matter to move about it without friction or resistance. It is elastic, but cannot be distorted. It moves, but its motion cannot be detected. It exerts force on matter, but matter exerts no force on it. It has no mass, nor has it any part which can be identified. It is said to be at rest relatively to the fifth star. Yet the stars are known to be in motion relatively to one another. In the Restless Universe by Max Born, we read, 100 years ago, the ether was regarded as an elastic body, something like a jelly, but much stiffer and lighter so that it could vibrate extremely rapidly, but a great many phenomena culminating in the Michelson experiment and the theory of relativity showed that the ether must be something very different from ordinary terrestrial substances. Now, an ether is also required for electricity and magnetism. Again, from the Nature of the Physical World by A.S. Eddington, the great authority on the subject we have, this does not mean that the ether is abolished. We need an ether. In the last century, it was widely believed that ether was a kind of matter having properties such as mass, rigidity, motion, like ordinary matter. It would be difficult to say that when this view died out. Nowadays, it is agreed that ether is not a kind of matter. Being non-material, its properties are sui generis, quite unique. Characters such as mass and rigidity, which we meet with in matter, will neutrally be absent in ether. But ether will have new and definite characters of its own, non-material ocean of ether. Although the scientists have firmly come to believe ether as non-material, their attempts to defect it are not yet over. The most ingenious and well-known experiment devised to detect ether was performed some 55 years ago, and it is known as Michelson-Morley experiment, very famous experiment. The idea of the experiment is this: if all material bodies are really swimming through a limitless ocean of ether, it is quite easy to find how fast they are moving through it. The following analogy will make the point clear. The time taken to row a boat a certain distance up a swift river and down again is always greater than the time taken to row the same distance across the river and back. Even if water were invisible, one could calculate how fast it was flowing by measuring the time either way. In the same way, it was argued that if Earth were really moving through ether, a ray of light would take a longer time to go to a mirror and return a certain distance along the Earth's motion than across it. Exactly. If ether were material medium, for the Earth to move through this seemed bound to be so. The experiment was performed in America by means of the most delicate apparatus and to the great disappointment of the workers. It was found that both journeys of the ray of light took exactly the same time, in the words of Richard Hughes. It showed that to try seriously to find out facts about the ether, as if it were a real thing, would be almost as absurd as to try and find out what wood the good shepherd's crook is made of. The above experiment was performed in 1881 and in 1905. The experiment was repeated with better precautions. The result was published in the Proceedings of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the result again being 0. During the period 1921-25, a series of more exhaustive and elaborate experiments were carried out by Professor D. Miller and Mount Wilson, California. 5,000 observations were recorded for full periods of 24 hours and extending over 10 days. The final conclusions were that there was a relative motion of the Earth and the ether. The result produced a great commotion in the scientific world, for Michelson-Morley experiment led us to conclude that either there was no material ether, or that it moves with the Earth, or that it is at rest in space, while Miller's work indicated ether dragged and proved ether to be not non-existent. More delicate experiments were taken up in Germany in the year 1925 by Tomschek to detect the motion reported by Miller. The work of Tomschek was again criticized by Chose in America, and he carried out his experiments published in Physical Review, August 1926, but no such motion could be detected. The Michelson experiment has been again repeated in recent years in a free balloon at heights of nearly 1.5 and 3 miles, but the authors report that they are unable to confirm or refute the Miller's report. That Miller's results are for some reason inaccurate appears to have been established by the research of Kennedy and USA, published in November 1926. The famous Chicago rotation experiment, designed to rest the effect of the Earth's rotation on the velocity of light, confirmed the view that ether was stagnant, not moving. The physicists have something become very much confused over the ether controversy. In the words of M.M. Balik, if an ether does exist, it would be a four-dimension concept, and its absolute nature would be just as impossible of comprehension as the function which it serves. Let us review the whole situation. why were the scientists led too much absurd conclusions that ether was thinner than the thinnest gas and at the same time more rigid than steel, absolutely weightless and at the same time heavier than lead? The answer is because they then regarded ether as a sort of matter. That is, they identified Dharma Dravya with the Pudgala Dravya. And the discrepancies have now disappeared when they have come to regard it as a non-material amurtika medium. Remember the latest utterance of S.A.S. Eddington. Nowadays, it is agreed that ether is not a kind of matter. Why was the Michelson-Morley experiment performed and repeatedly performed with such great refinements? To find out whether the ocean of ether was moving or stagnant. And what is the latest pronouncement on the subject? B.C. Miller, in his paper, Ether Drift Experiment, Determination of the Absolute Motion of the Earth, says, the magnitude and direction of the observed effect vary in the manner required by the assumption that the Earth is moving through a fixed ether. There should be no surprise in the manner in which the scientists have arrived at this conclusion. As we have remarked several times in the prologue, we cite once more the words of A.D. Ritchie. Scientific men are bound to be revolutionary, to scrap ruthlessly whatever theories found to contradict facts and adopt a new one. So we see that on the basis of the latest scientific evidences, 2 points are well established. Dharma Dravya, the ether, is non-material, filling all space and not moving. Compare with this the Jain version. Amurto nishkriyo nityo matsyanam jalvad bhuvi. Dharma Dravya is formless, inactive, and eternal. It behaves like water towards the fish in the world. Some people think that with the advent of the theory of relativity, the ether has been thrown out of science. They should carefully note that the great exponent of relativity, Professor Eddington, has to say on this point. This does not mean that the ether is abolished. We need an ether. Thus, it is proved that science and Jain physics agree absolutely insofar as they call dharma non-material, non-atomic, non-discrete, continuous, coextensive with space, indivisible, and as necessary medium for motion, and one which does not itself move. Now, Adharma Dravya. So we will continue Adharma Dravya in our part 5, and we shall leave here. Jai Jinendra.